again, I want to just reiterate that I want to learn from you, right? Because each of you have so many experiences, and I don't have all the answers. I have just some answers, and I have a lot more questions, right? So the dialogue has been super, and we'll have fun throughout the day as we continue that. So just don't be shy at any point to raise a counterpoint or put another point in there. It's always really good. So we're going to talk about Lean UX. I've kind of hinted at it. I've kind of just mentioned it a few times, but let's go a little bit more into that and kind of where it comes from. So Lean UX comes from this concept of lean manufacturing, which started, I think it was probably back in the 70s. I'm not like an aficionado on lean manufacturing. I actually do a little research before I came here because I've actually just been practicing it without knowing all the roots of it. But it comes from the manufacturing revolution in Japan, and it put the emphasis on drawing knowledge from the individuals, down in the actual factory floors and such. The idea of shrinking batch sizes, like in the original, American, car manufacturing, it was all about the assembly line, and a person did one job, and they focused more on like smaller batch sizes and putting together, cars more a whole part, whole things together. And so a person didn't just do one thing, they did multi-functions and such like that. A little more of an integrated kind of approach was just kind of fascinating. In fact, there was a study done on like you're going to stuff envelopes, right? In fact, I heard Eric Ries the other day, who wrote the book Lean Startup. He was talking about this. You got a whole bunch of envelopes of stuff, and the typical way you think is, well, what we'll do is, I'll take, we'll fold all the papers, then we'll get all the envelopes and we'll stuff the envelopes and we'll lick all the envelopes and kind of do it like that. But actually, the job of getting, you get all your envelopes stacked, you get all your paper stacked, you do all your things like that, and you get your envelopes. The in-between time is actually creates some inefficiency. That it's actually better to fold one and stuff it, fold one and stuff it, fold one and stuff it, just do the whole thing like that, which is kind of a little bit counterintuitive, which kind of comes from this concept of lean, doing smaller batch sizes. This whole idea of just-in-time production and inventory control. I worked at i2 Technologies, which is a supply chain planning company. I guess they still are. And it was, there I learned about kind of the just-in-time supply chain planning. This is back in the 90s, and that inventory is cost, and so the more you kind of build up inventory and don't actually utilize it, the worse it is for your system. In fact, when I was many years ago, when I first getting out of school, I worked for a company that made oil pumping units. You've seen the oil pumping units that have the up and down like this. That was made in Lufkin, Texas. Lufkin Industries was the one that patented that idea, and I worked at Lufkin Industries where we made those. And the gearbox that sits in, it had a facing, where the gear would come in and be put in. That facing had to be milled. And so I was on the boring mill, which was a boring job, a boring mill. And so me and a friend of mine, we started this company, be the graveyard shift, needed a job, 19 years old or whatever, 20 years, whatever it was. And so, you're doing the facing down, and everybody did like 3 a night, right? 3 of these gearboxes a night. So the first night we did, 3. We thought, well, that wasn't too bad. Let's try. There's like an art to getting that down to the micrometers, and you had your little gauge and all that. And after a few nights of 3, we were like, yeah, let's try for 4. And so we did 4, and then we did 5, and then of course the whole line got pissed at us, because these 2 kids coming and showing them up because they're all union, and we're doing 5 a night. They've been doing 3 forever, and they're like, what the hell are you doing? These old guys were like, I think ready to beat us up. and I was so proud. I got a quarter an hour raise, and managers like so happy. Then I go to i2 Technologies, and I realized that it was actually not helping the company because I was just creating inventory. I was backing up the system somewhere because the whole system wasn't being efficient, right? I was just pulling more inventory through, So it's kind of a very counterintuitive thing. They have a process called Kanban, which is basically, very lightweight tracking. You can think of it almost like a whiteboard where you're tracking the things that need to be done. But the things you're doing, what you're trying to do, and Kanban is really learn. The whole goal is to, you're writing stories, if you will, like an Agile, but the result of that is a learning. You're trying to get to a point to know whether, this product or this feature or this whatever is being done the right way or should be done a different way. So the whole emphasis is around learning. So in the book, The Lean Startup, that came out in 2011, Eric Ries, I highly recommend the book to you. He did a lot of looking at startups and in the Valley and other places, and really to understand the phenomenon of a startup and how the best, what the best startups, how they were successful. And he began to advise and consult with, and he had his own startups he had done, and apply in his discussion with startups concepts he was learning. Yeah, yes.
I was just going to say, just talking about lean, it's kind of interesting that I work for a company that's growing by acquiring other manufacturing companies that don't apply these principles, and they're using a modified and proprietary lean
interesting
process to then make them much more efficient. And bring them into the fold.
Wow.
And they actually just doubled in size this year.
Wow.
Doing that with a bigger company that was all over the map.
That's incredible.
These are effective.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating study. I always like to find, by the way, I have a whole bookshelf in the design area where there are books about not web design, but about some other form of design. And I love reading those books to extract ideas about how to design, like shaker furniture design, or architecture, or I've got books on magic, understanding how to actually the art of misdirection and how that figures into experience. Same thing in this. What I think is fascinating about this, what I like about this, is taking another area of study like lean manufacturing, applying it to lean startups. And now we're applying it to lean UX, and today I'm applying it to lean engineering, right? It's a fun exercise to sort of apply these principles.
And it also shows that, how many years later after it was out that
this was the 60s or 70s, I forget.
Yeah, I think you're right, 70s.
Yeah, I think it was the 70s. It's Toyota, this when Toyota really sort of came. In fact, in 76, for my high school graduation, I got a Toyota Celica hatchback. So I was the beneficiary of the lean the lean principles back then. But he defines startup as a human institution designed to create a new product or service under conditions of uncertainty. And I think that's a good key phrase there, conditions of, and at the break, to hear on the front and the black shirt, what's your name again? Eric, okay. Eric and I were talking, about this rapid rate of change that's, happens in our industry now, much more so than it did, in the 90s or 80s. And, this is that uncertainty, right? And so, but a startup doesn't have to be, 3 or 4 people in a garage. We can have startups within our, the Best Buys and the PayPals and, whatever organization you have. It's basically you're trying to create new product or service under the conditions of uncertainty. So I like this definition because it takes it out of that, we're not a startup, no, you can operate like a startup, right? And one other thing he talks about is developing experimentation systems, and these don't have to just be A/B testing. We could talk about different ways to do experimentation a little bit, that allow teams to move at the speed of these systems instead of the speed of Caesar giving a thumbs up or thumbs down. Executives have had the role of being the hippo, the highest paid person in the room, their opinion, or giving the thumbs up, thumbs down. But it democratizes the whole situation because it puts it in our consumers' hands. And if we have experimentation systems that give us data back, then we're informed, by that, instead of the whims of somebody, the person who's, a great designer or whatever. In the lean, yes, question?
Just a quick little point.
Yeah.
There was a quote, I think, from General Lee or someone that, when you're leading a charge, there's always a lack of information. You can't wait to know everything.
Yeah.
That sort of hits me.
That's good. That's really good. Everybody hear that? Robert E. Lee, right? You're talking about, when you're going charging into battle, there's always some information you don't know, and you can't wait for all the information to come in. you have to operate on what you have when you're.
Yeah,
That's good.
It's a different mindset.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of plagued our industry, especially engineering. We want to know everything we can, because and try to build. And then we've tried to get around those with lots of different approaches, right? He talks about a minimal or minimum viable product, MVP, and it's basically, instead of trying to do the big bang and create all the feature sets and everything, it's especially, let's just say you're going into a whole new space. Let's take the simplest example, and you decide, what would be the most minimal viable product I need? So the guys who created Instagram, Mike Krieger, Mikey actually used to work for me at Mevo. And in fact, he turned his resignation in to me and said, dude, I'm really sorry. I wanted to work with you and all this, 2 months, or a month in or whatever. But I'm going to start this company called Bourbon. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. He told me about this social thing he's going to do. And I thought to myself, there's already so many social things that are out there, right? Okay. But Mikey is a really smart guy, and he's one of the best guys I've ever known. Just a wonderful human being. I couldn't be happier. He's worth $100 million or whatever he's worth right now. So he is a complete example of this lean startup, because they went to do Bourbon, and there is a larger kind of social play on mobile, and at some point they realized that sharing photos on the web on mobile just kind of sucks. We could just do that one thing. That being their minimal viable product. Don't try to solve all this thing that Bourbon was originally going to do, which is what it pitched to me. And they pivoted, which is another point up here, being able to pivot and do that minimal viable product just to be able to share photos. And they added this little extra thing to be able to put the filters on to make it a little interesting. So you give it more artsy flair, and you can take your kind of normal pictures and make them look a little more cool, a little more artsy. Not much features there at all, and not a lot of, it's a clean design, but it wasn't like, it's not like a full, it's like, there was nothing but a feature within Facebook, if you will, right? If Facebook or Flickr should have done this, right? And I know the guys at Flickr, and Flickr was, acquired when I was as I was joining Yahoo, and I know Stuart and Katerina that founded Flickr, and they went on to do other things, but Flickr just kind of laid stagnant at Yahoo and never got the love, attention. I could give you story about that, why that happened. But here's, Instagram is still, 3 people. It was 2 people at first. It was 3 people. I think by the time they launched, there were 10 or 15 or whatever it was. They seized on this idea of a minimal viable product. They seized on this idea of pivoting. They didn't, stay married to their idea. And they had lots of friends, that were, willing to test and play with the product as they were developing it to get the feedback. And because with the great thing about the web and all the tools we have, they could spin up a company pretty fast and get it to where they could get some scale to start changing things. This idea of Kanban also, he talks about it here, just the simple tracking of stories. And the goal is to validate the learning. And again, there's the idea of small batches, small releases, not large, big projects that have big bang.